clock on it is not the same as the one up there.
I'm not surprised. He's aware that we're not going down there yet. And he's fine.
They're about doing something on the road right now.
Trying to catch a fox.
Was a red fox.
They're catching a fox.
Well, I don't know if they was catching it.
What were they doing?
Kelly and her husband were there.
He was chasing after it when we went by.
Oh.
With a net or something?
No, he was talking to it.
Who was talking to them?
Bob,
Hmm.
Okay. Interesting.
he told me to stop. I stopped and then the thing went across the road. I took off.
Okay. Well, there were two of the SUVs and a cruiser. So it's our full armada heading towards
It's training night.
Rollins Road. Are they all joining fishing game?
Good
All right,
for
6 o'clock. Going ahead of my car, so that's okay though. We'll call this, what's that, June, yeah, well, I wish we were doing, March 25th, Rollinsford Select Board meeting to order, 6 o'clock. First order of business is community input. Community input, all right. Highway Department, just put that on there, just in case George came in. We have a non-public personnel issue for police. Are we expecting the chief?
I'm
or-
not expecting him, I don't think we
All right, we'll hold it
need
till
him.
the end then.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna make people leave to come right back and then leave again. So. Welfare also? Is
we
that for
can do them
non-public?
together, if it
Okay.
is, yeah.
Okay. Town administration, okay, so, as you've noticed, Denise is not able to be here again tonight. We expect her back in a few weeks, I guess, after she recovers. So, in her stead, we need to, the budget committee would like to meet, and so the ex officio is supposed to call the first meeting after the election, so they can elect a new chair. Could be the same chair, I don't care about that, but we need to call it. So I had been the second runner-up, I guess, for that. I'm happy to do that, unless you have some burning desire to.
Nope, if you,
So we're gonna call the first budget committee meeting for April 3rd, which is the
Next Wednesday.
next Wednesday, I guess. And then on April 5th, we have our first quarterly department head meeting, which is that Friday, next Friday. I feel it's April already. I feel like we're really rushing through now. We have, clearly we have that meeting at 6:30 at the fire station, so there'll be a few minutes to get down there anyways, but, board member activities, do you have any updates for us, Miles? Anything?
last Thursday, we had a stormwater committee meeting. We continue to push forward with, figuring out what we need to do in year one. It's mostly about, communication and, tracking who gets communicated to. Paul Cazalt, Caroline and myself are meeting tomorrow to hammer out. There's some confusion with the stormwater regs that were adopted by the planning board a few years ago. Does that ring a bell with you?
It wasn't that many years ago, but yeah, well, actually, it might have been, how many,
Two.
maybe
I
2
think it was
years ago?
April of
now?
17.
Okay.
Yeah, a couple years ago. The
Anyway,
ones that
are
the feds gave us?
It was, the state
state
gave
rather gave us.
Suzanne language that
Right.
she handed to the planning board and
Right.
said, put this here.
So what's
And
the
they-
issue? That's where we put it, what the state told us to put it.
Yeah,
yeah, I think Paul thinks they're out of date. So we're just
Oh, they may be, but
We
that's
need to-
because, that's the state's for updated one said.
we need to revisit, and we can bring that back to Stratford Regional or even the Office of OSI, Office of Strategic Initiatives, is that right, the planning, estate planning people, and
Yeah, they changed their name, you're right, it's something like that now.
something like that, and we can see what they think about it. So we're not completely floating alone with that. We can have somebody review it for us. Well, hey there.
Did you get that box?
We had to dispatch it, yes.
So,
Killed it?
anything else?
Stormwater.
How about an update on the ZBA?
I did not make it to the ZBA meeting last Tuesday.
The ZBA meeting was really long and interesting and well-attended by the abutters. They deliberated both sides of the issue. It was confusing for everyone in attendance. The issue of non-conforming use and the expansion of non-conforming use and the extent to which case law seems to support the idea that that's allowed, as long as it's generally within the same, things can evolve over time, as long as they're not really remarkably different. And that was kind of a surprise to learn, since our zoning regulations do not allow an expansion of non-conforming uses. So, the planning board's gonna have to look at that going forward. But there were two matters. The first was whether or not to uphold the administrative decision behind the letter Tom Clark sent out for cease and desist. They upheld that, which means essentially that towing is not an allowed use. They were trying to argue that trucking terminals are allowed and that the towing is akin to a trucking terminal. So they lost on that account. The second matter was a variance of the zoning ordinance. Would they, given that towing is not allowed, would they allow towing? And they found that towing really isn't remarkably different from trucking terminals, which are allowed in that district. And so they found it hard to argue against allowing it, because it's hard to justify not allowing towing if you allow trucking terminals. And so
How do they define trucking terminal?
well, they struggled with that for a long time, and everybody came up with a different answer.
They could still allow it under that?
Well, our zoning ordinance allows trucking, so trucking terminals, and so, one could argue, they tried to argue, that towing is essentially a trucking of freight being cars. And so it's not really much of an extension. So the ZBA struggled with that because they are really cognizant of the neighbors' concerns, which are valid, that there are things going on there. But they kept their scope narrow, that they couldn't take into account things beyond whether or not to allow towing, and not so much about the specific behaviors and instances that are going on at that location.
In the planning board?
So, they struggled with that, but they really they were happy that it's going to planning. They really want planning to regulate it as much as planning can regulate it, because they didn't really want to allow it. They just kind of felt like they had to.
Okay. So he now has to go through site review?
So he's now going to site review. It also came up, we don't really have a policy or any kind of, the junkyard ordinance, the junkyard license rather, is still not issued. So for that reason, he has to continue on with planning. But it brought up the point for, just in terms of process, how do we compel people to go directly from ZBA to planning in a timely manner? And so that's something that we should try to work into our regs somewhere. But in any case, we should see him in planning soon.
Okay.
So Tom Clark and I are working on things to consider. We have the Municipal Association puts out a really extensive booklet, although dated, about junkyards. So we're reviewing that, and still whether or not it happens right this minute, part of what we still need to do is adopt a junkyard ordinance, and Tom's looking into template ordinance and what kind of things should go into such an ordinance. But the municipal association recommends that for any community that has even one junkyard.
Okay. Good luck around the planning board. Oh, no, you were. Not you anymore, it's you. All right, so, well, we got time. So, things like hours of operation will be on the table,
Yes, and really in screening and,
paving,
yes,
all the things he's supposed to be doing under the junkyard agreement now, but
yes.
somehow is going to be seeing license.
Also, an abutter brought another one up to my attention, which is that towing requires that customers visit to pick up their cars, and
Mhm.
the planning board might consider restroom facilities for visitors, because,
ADA compliant spaces, all of it.
yeah,
Good luck with site review.
thank you, I'll need it.
Okay, the chief is here, so we're gonna go under non-public at the, do you have anything else besides non-public for us?
Well, I suppose we can wait till next week.
Oh, we can do it, we just wait, we're just.
I have nothing for
wait till-
non-public, so I can wait.
Okay, so we're gonna do that and welfare. Do we have any correspondence that we need to go through tonight?
Nope.
Oh, never mind,
Would you please stay?
then stay.
All right.
Then you don't have to go anywhere. All right, so then my intention is to, actually, is there any other community input? We'll do that now. All right, my intention is to go into non-public session to deal with the personnel issue and then go to non-public for welfare and be at the fire station by 6:30, so. All right, so I need a motion to go into non-public
I
for
move we go into
personnel issue.
non-public session for a personal issue.
I'll second that. Roll call, Milo?
Yes.
Mike, yes. All right, we're in non-public session for personnel issue. Have a good night. Unless you're staying.
Tati,
Oh, this.
it's not very hot anymore.
Okay, fine, but-
Caroline, is the